Hey guys, Clint Coons here, and in this video we're going to talk about which entity your out-of-state or in-state property manager shall pay your rent to on a monthly basis. Now, the reason why this is such a concern for you is that many people, when they create structures for asset protection, you're using multiple entities. For example, you'll see in many of my diagrams as you watch my YouTube channel, I will typically create several boxes here to hold real estate. I'll tell you, you should have one property per LLC. And so you get this stuff set up like this. And then maybe you will have a holding company down here. Okay, this is going to typically be in Wyoming Limited Liability Company. And of course, you're down here as the member of this Wyoming LLC, and all of these are owned 100% by the Wyoming LLC. And so this is the way the structures come together. Now, you're personally not managing any of this. You're having an out-of-state, if these investments are out of state, or maybe if they're in state, you're having some third party manage your property for you. So on a monthly basis, they've accumulated all of the rents from these tenants, and so they're sitting on $3,000. The question then becomes, to whom are they going to pay that money back over? Now, if you've been doing this in your own name for a long time before you set up entities, it was pretty easy to figure that one out, right? They would just send you a check for $3K with an owner statement that lays out all of the expenses associated with each property and its income. But when you've set up LLCs, you've basically changed it now. There's no longer just one owner of those three properties, it's one owner per property. Now, some people will want to have the checks sent to each LLC. Now, you can definitely do that. So, for example, you would tell your property manager to send the check for this property to this LLC. So you'd have to have a bank account here, of course, a bank account here, a bank account here. Now, that works in some situations, but I know from firsthand experience with some of my property managers, let's say they're managing 35 properties in Houston. If I told them I wanted 35 separate checks, they would tell me there's no way they're going to do that, or they're going to want to charge me more. Most times they want to just have a wire transfer go, so they want to send out one transfer. So therein becomes a problem. If your property manager is unwilling to give you 3 separate wires or 3 separate checks on a monthly basis, then what you're going to have to do is determine which entity you should have those funds paid to. Now, depending on your structure, that is, if you're using something like this, or maybe you have a separate management entity up here, it's going to probably change where those funds are going to go. So if you're not using the management entity, and I've got another video that discusses when you should use your own property management company, you can check that one out. But if I'm not using this, then I will oftentimes have the property manager send the money to the Wyoming LLC because it's the owner of all these other properties. Now, if you do that, of course, you're bypassing these 3 LLCs that actually own the real estate. And I've heard many people say, well, Clint, if you bypass those LLCs, then you're ignoring the formalities, you're not running the money through them, and that's going to weaken the shield the LLC provides or allow someone to potentially pierce the veil. Granted, that could be an argument, but as I explain to people who typically bring this up, who are not real estate investors, I tell them, the reality is you don't have that option because the property managers won't send out 3 separate checks, or in my case, 35 separate checks. They only want to send one wire. So in that situation, I have to determine where that's going to go. And I choose to send it to my holding company. Now, when it comes down to my holding company, of course, this is why you have to have good books and records. So I use a bookkeeper who would then allocate out the appropriate income and expenses for each of these LLCs, and all that is tracked for tax purposes, and it's also tracked for business purposes, asset protection. So if anyone challenged me, I would show them that I'm separately accounting for the income associated with each of those properties. So that's one way to do it. If you're not having the properties manager send the money directly to the LLCs themselves. Now let's assume that your structure is sufficiently large. You've watched that video where I talk about when you want to use your own property management company. If you had your own property management company set up, maybe it's a limited liability company, something of that nature, then in that situation, you may direct them to send the money to this entity here. So now it comes to this entity. Now, when it hits this entity, that's where you're going to do all your accounting and your bookkeeping there. And the reason why you're going to be handling at that level is because oftentimes you want to scrape off a few extra dollars for an additional management fee. And what that's doing is reducing the income that's taxable to you down in your 1040. So if I did that and I collected the money up here, then I could do the exact same thing, roll it out of my own property management entity that I own and create. So this is Clint up here running this company. It's dealing with the out-of-state PMs over here, owner statements coming right here. Then I turn around, issue out a second owner statement to this LLC on behalf of these 3 properties, and I send down $2,600 because I kept $400 up here for the services I provided. So that would be another scenario in which you could run the funds. But it really comes down to working with your property manager and determining where they're willing to send it. And if they tell you, hey, we're only going to cut one wire or one check, then I would look at doing this. Now, if you don't have that Wyoming LLC in place, then of course you're going to have a structure that is just you down there owning your various business entities. Then of course you'd probably have them send it to you. I would probably tell you, if you had multiple LLCs set up and you didn't have that holding LLC, I would consider setting one up, or at a bare minimum doing a separate structure over here with a separate LLC just to do all the accounting and collect the funds and then distribute it down to yourself. So you have some options there. You just want to make sure that you're tracking it the right way. The books and records is probably the most important aspect of this entire structure when it comes to working with a property manager and determining where to send your funds. All right, guys, hope you understood that video. If you got any questions, throw them down below. I'll be sure to answer those questions. And again, hey, if you liked the video, give me a few likes. And if you haven't yet subscribed, be sure to subscribe to my channel and check back next week where I'll have another great video for you on tax and asset protection strategies for real estate investors.